today, when people show interest in what, in particular, Buddhism has to say, specifically through what Buddhist teachers have to say, they mostly are interested in things that are relevant to their lives. Basically looking at things within what is being said by a particular teacher and to see how that can help them in their lives. And there's nothing wrong with this, of course. I speak about relatedness, the relatability of whatever it is that is being taught, whatever that is being explored, relatable to one's own particular situations and needs in this case. This in itself is wonderful. However, there is also a dangerous phenomenon that has been taking place concurrently. And that has to do with sifting through what is being heard, what is being taught, and looking for things that are only matching the particular situational factors of, let's say, the listener. What I mean by this is cherry picking what is being said to fit one's own narratives, to fit one's own interpretations or conclusions and opinions, basically, about one's life, about the teachings, about what Buddhism is supposed to be, given, again, the influences that prevail in one's life. So basically the person is looking for an ideal match of one's own constitution, ideal match to what one already believes. This is wrong. This is unhealthy. This is dangerous. And this is what we see also happening in Buddhism, or anybody interested in Buddhism coming in, so long as they have these inclinations, these underlying factors. The person will not be able, at best, will not be able to extract and to benefit from whatever the Buddha taught. Why? Because your bucket is already almost full. You're simply looking for embellishments from here, there, from this teacher, from this incident, and if it doesn't fit your worldview, then you just drop it. So that supermarket browser attitude is still ongoing and very strong in people's attitudes these days. Why? Because you look around, you look at this vast resource called an internet. If you didn't like this, the whole thing about swiping, I don't know if it was swiping left or right, but basically, if something didn't agree with you, if a person, this was years ago when they started converting, people's interactions into the digital arena, people had so many options at their fingertips, literally at their fingertips. By a simple swipe, they could get rid of possibilities with this, all because it didn't fit. They didn't find this person attractive, they didn't find this activity attractive or interesting. you just swipe the other direction, and then there's other endless plethora of possibilities waiting for you. And that's what we still do. You go on any social media setting, whatever is available nowadays. Same thing applies, of course, with news, anything that can pull your attention. And it's impossible for you to always be granted whatever it is that you wanted, so there will be tweaking and adjustments necessary. And because of anicca, or impermanence, always there, things don't last. So we lose interest in that particular thing, and we'll just swipe and get another one. Something a little bit more fresh. Something that is a little bit more interesting, more attractive, more intriguing, more seductive, more provocative, to serve us there at that point. And then that one disappears too. So there's a rising, there's a sustaining, and then there's a disappearing, just like the breath. This is the essence of anicca. If a person knows how to apply the teachings, it's all around us. Unfortunately, people do not even get to this level. Why? Because we are caught by the other extra embellishments, components, other superficial things, the bells and whistles on things. We never give the Dhamma the time of day to penetrate through the delusion in our minds. Why? Because we're too busy sifting through what interests me, what moves me, what intrigues me. That is today's sickness that's driven by convenience. Convenience. Is it convenient to me? You've often heard me mention about the resources that we have, as I mentioned earlier, about the resource of the internet. Today you have countless avenues, places where individuals could go and, for example, access the words of the Buddha. I happen to be one of them, through the work that I've been doing for several years, that I started years ago as a layman, translating and recording the suttas, recording the discourses that we have from the Pali, and then completely going and revamping the whole redoing, basically completely retranslating those discourses and then uploading them. Why? Well, to make it available. But what do we do with material like that? Whether it's from this provider of information or something you get from Wikipedia or somewhere. It's information, yes? What do I do with the information? I have to apply, of course, critical thinking. I have to apply rationale. I have to, of course, have something with me to come with, right? I have to have some interest in this versus some other thing over there that I'm not interested in. Okay, here is where we need to check our motives. Remember the word convenience I said. It's dangerous when we are driven by convenience. That's the problem, when the person is looking for things that match their own worldview, looking for even Buddhist teachers that resonate with them, in the sense that they are talking about issues that they also have concluded the same. Well, the bhikkhu might be completely biased. The bhikkhu's job is to be speaking the words of the Buddha, not their own interpretations. If it doesn't address the Dhamma, if it's not helping show the Dhamma to the person, to the reader, to the listener, then the whole objective of that bhikkhu or that teacher or whatever that person may be in whatever role, layman or monastic, really becomes obsolete. Why? Because you're spreading delusion. You're spreading ignorance. You are basically a placeholder of Mara. Your behavior is in fact evil when it compares to what it is supposed to be doing versus what it is doing. This in relation to the teachings. This in relation to what the Buddha taught. This is key. Because when a person is interested in Buddhism, in the Dhamma, and they come to learn, they come to, well, at least find out what is it all about. Often there's a lot of junk out there. Through media, through movies, this and that, Buddhist monks were, being tossed here and there, in this scenario, Buddhism this. Many people still want to approach Buddhism through the lens of Hollywood, through some novel that they've read, some character, some famous character somewhere saying something. So it is all coming through the lens, the thick, thick lens of something that doesn't even exist. It's just basically illusion-based. Why? Because the person is going and taking the path of what is familiar, what is convenient, versus really diving headfirst into understanding and learning what the Dhamma is about. Because what that will require from us is that we have to relinquish a lot of the junk that we've been carrying. Because you cannot become wise when the basis that you're coming with is completely false. If you're coming with a bucket full of ignorance, don't expect yourself to become wise. You have to unload, you have to drop all that. So convenience here I'm using also as a proxy for maintaining our ignorance, yet somehow wanting to benefit from Buddhism. This is big. Why? Because you have a lot of ignorant statements being made left and right in society today in the name of Buddhism. When you're looking, or when you're trying to learn a new language, and let's say you go get yourself a dictionary, you want to find out a term, the definition of a term, a word, a character. And you have some ideas about it because it sounds a certain way. It sounds in a way kind of something as if it's familiar, but you're not sure, so that's why you're reaching for the dictionary. You pull it out from a library shelf and then you look, and it has nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with what you thought. Now, what many people today are doing is they also have with them a red marker. They are scratching off, they are Xing out the definition of that term. Why? Because it didn't fit their worldview. This is the problem, a big problem. Even with scholars, even with scholarly types, even with people who've read more than a few books. This includes individuals who have teachers who almost like given them the guru status, and they just believe whatever that teacher says, whether they are monastics or not, whether they are Westerners or not. Why? Because it's convenient. It's convenient to what? For what? In relation to what? To the person and their worldview. The person does not want to be shaken up, turned upside down, flipped upside down, and really shaken up badly so that all that junk comes off, so that there's now room for the wisdom that is there, for the intelligent conversations, for the challenging discourses that are waiting for the reader, for the listener, right there in the discourses in the Pali texts, the original teachings of the Buddha. That's why I'm a big advocate of that. Prior, by the way, to making my journey back to the Pali texts on a personal level, when I was still a student of the Dhamma, I began exploring other traditions, of course. I wanted to know. This is when I was a layman, when I was in my teens. And then I found my way to Buddhism. But I didn't know what lineage is what tradition is what, from which region. For me, they were all the same. In the 70s, there was the program by, I think it was originally written by Bruce Lee. And it was a TV series in the 70s. It was called Kung Fu. Later on, the person who took the role, which was intended for Bruce Lee himself, and Hollywood gave it to David Carradine, the actor who carried through it, and even was in a movie called recent years, I think Kill Bill or something, series. Okay, why am I mentioning this? Well, for us, it was all the same, growing up in the 70s. And then you explore further, and then slowly, you need to, especially when you tap into the history part, you see some anomalies, some things. And then when you dive deep into the Dhamma, you start seeing some major problems. It's no longer cute. It's no longer culturally valuable, as scholars would like to say, to look at this lineage over here that started or sprouted in a different era, a different time period, in a different culture with different people, under a different set of circumstances, compared to that one over there, which was in a different time period, etc., etc. For me, it became very important to go to the source. That's why I explored within the sphere of Buddhism, just Buddhism, Dhamma, the development of Buddhism. I went back to the Pali, to the old texts, after having made a big loop, a big journey, and studied with Vajrayana teachers, Mahayana teachers, Theravada teachers. And then I found myself, I have to go back to the source. Despite the fact that many of the things were challenging my worldview, my understanding of Buddhism, my understanding and not just understanding, but my acceptance of what the Buddha represented for me, should represent to history. Because I had my clippers with me all the time. I was cherry picking what the Buddha was saying. And then I realized that's so unfair in any realm, in any kind of discipline. If you're studying history, you can't go and explore this character in history with your clippers in hand. Cherry picking, no, this doesn't fit my idea of this person. This doesn't fit my, I was not expecting this detail about this person. Okay, so I have to clip this out, trim this out. You can't do that. Why? Because I was looking for convenience. Something that was convenient to my narratives in life, the way I understood and took. When it came to Sila, for example, I was always minimizing the importance of Sila, the virtue that the Buddha talks about again and again. So today's listener, the ones who are interested in the Dhamma, they are not necessarily interested in the Dhamma proper. They're looking for some cute interaction, something that can basically validate where they are and what they believe in. And this is completely wrong. It's interesting, I was reading an article recently on the importance of handwriting. Handwriting versus, or taking longhand notes and taking notes by hand, basically, versus doing it with a digital platform like a keyboard, a laptop, even an iPad. They've done so many different experiments for at least 10, 15 years in the world, different parts of the world, from China to Europe to the US, to see if there are any differences. And lo and behold, there are, to the level of decreasing Alzheimer's patient symptoms by 30% in elderly populations who are trying to learn or memorize characters. Hanzi, it's called, characters, Chinese characters. How to write it, how to write the character, because there's so many nuances with every single character, because it is activating different parts of the brain and the hand, of course, the arm, the eyes, the flow of the pen or the brush, the eyes following that. Elementary teachers, early childhood education teachers are horrified today, however, in the most Western countries, at least, when the child comes in and cannot even hold a pencil or a pen or a crayon. This is a fact. This is a fact. There have been, students in studies who would be very assiduous, very diligent, very astute in their, wanting to learn. They go to the university classes, auditoriums, and they sit there right, in a good position to see the graphs, the instruction, this, that, clearly hearing everything without any distractions, with their laptops in front to take notes. And they take brilliant notes. They take almost verbatim everything, and that's the problem. They're not thinking. Why? Because it's a miracle to have a laptop. Because it's a wonder of technology, right? But what we do is we are relinquishing the capacity to comprehend, to process information for the sake of convenience. Today, even scientists are seeing this. They're they're very outspoken about this. They're really telling us there's this big problem, something that we've always felt to be not a good thing that's happening when people walked away from handwriting. And handwriting doesn't mean like, those, I don't know what they call them, like, writing all in caps. I noticed this in my students, in some students, even adults. Students as in when I was in college and university settings. But why? If they wrote anything at all by hand. Cursive, handwriting, to be able to just write your thoughts leaves its mark on you, of course, even years after. It's so personalized because if somebody else picks up your notes that you've taken, let's say in class, they won't necessarily be able to easily read it. Why? Because it's so personal. You have touched it with your own level of comprehension. You've added something. And by the way, those students who were taking notes with their laptops were later on coming back to the professor in their office hours and asking for help because they were failing miserably. They were not scoring the grades that they wanted. And it didn't make sense because they were really hardworking students. A students. And the professors made the suggestion of switching for some time to handwriting. Just taking notes through long form, longhand. And lo and behold, the results. This didn't happen in a singular case. This has been happening. So why do I say this? Convenience can be detrimental and is detrimental definitely when we are approaching the Dhamma, approaching Buddhism from that angle, from that position. When I'm looking for teachers who, for some reason, I like their appearance. I like the way they sound. I like the way they address these political issues or realities of life. I like the way they, say this about that. All of these are the wrong reasons, by the way. We have to be very categorical about this. Why? Because the primary reason why we approach the Dhamma or Buddhism or what the Buddha taught should not be the teacher, this or that teacher. It should be the teacher who we are studying, whose life we are trying to deep dive into, to understand, and the interactions while leaving ourselves and our buckets of ignorance out of the door. So this requires humility. And this is really even more horrendous when we take into consideration that the suttas or the discourses that teachers today, modern day teachers, so-called teachers of the Dhamma, the discourses that they bring out discussing to and with people, their audiences, their listeners, are the ones that have become somehow popular with the masses. And you see this in Asia over the course of centuries. So the dumbing down of the Dhamma, unfortunately, started with the monastics by picking topics or themes and only elaborating or discussing aspects of the Dhamma represented within a certain sutta from a certain angle to fit the level of understanding and comprehension or taste buds of the listeners in that particular. And how much would that bring in, how much attention, how much support, how much money, how much, etc., etc. So this happened centuries ago. This is not new. That's why in India it disappeared. Ultimately, it wasn't the Muslims or the Brahmins even, the non-Buddhists basically, who destroyed Buddhism in India. It was the Buddhists. Let's not forget that. Because we can quickly point the finger at the people who have actually pulled the swords and cut down the monks. Those were the Muslims, and primarily who were coming in, invading India. But the real destruction had already taken place long before they showed up. And that is what they've infected the Dhamma with. Whether it was Nalanda University, etc., Takshila before that. So when you're catering to the taste buds, the level of comprehension of your audience, without being fearlessly talking about discourses that challenge their worldview, when you're simply catering to their taste buds, you've already missed the mark, put it lightly. Now the problem is that lay people, unfortunately, have fallen into this trap. In the name of, they don't use the word convenience, in the name of, pertinent information, the Buddha was a modern thinker, he was a social activist, this. Even the terms that these monks have come up with, writing books on the Dhamma, on the Buddha. But the lay people look at these individuals, look at these teachers and say, oh, well, he's credentialed, he's knowledgeable, he's this, he's this and that. Completely forgetting to look at the words, to pay attention to what the Buddha is saying in these interactions. So we need to look beyond our own expectations. Otherwise, we are holding on to our red marker and looking at the Buddha's words with, just waiting for that word or statement or term that we don't agree with so that we can go ahead and slash it out. That's what you've seen in so-called Buddhist magazines like Tricycle and others that came up over the last few decades, pushing their own agendas, pushing their own, feminist and this and that agendas upon, calling out monastics as being masochistic and this and that. Even in some cases, the Arya Savakas, the misogynist, being called these things and being distributed like this in the Western world, and then have some in connection with some, quote-unquote reputable Buddhist organization here and there, or meditation group, or, official. Nonsense. The subscription, how many thousands of readers they had, that was their legitimacy, and how much money was being poured in by the wealthy donors and the powers that be who are promoting such things to cut at the root of the Dhamma. In the name of Dhamma, by simply putting a picture of the Buddha on the cover of your magazine does not make it Buddhist. Really. It has nothing to do with it. It's another version of Hollywood. It's another version of the deception, the ploys. So this is addressing a question on how to decipher. The Dhamma is there. You have nothing to worry about. It's there. I, for one, am doing my best before I die to make sure that we can get back to the sources of the Pali text without, the extra junk that nowadays some translators have been infusing in, full of their own, agendas. Going back to the word of the Buddha, leaving out the commentaries, leaving out all the modern so-called commentaries, the political activism that they're shooting into it. Pulling that out, all that, those weeds, those terrible, terrible parasitic things out. The Dhamma is there. What is even more important then is for us to make sure when we're approaching the Dhamma, we maintain the fact that we are reading this book, we are reading this text, this discourse, we're familiarizing ourselves with it, not to augment our current level of understanding of the Dhamma. In many cases, it needs a major overhaul. It demands that we uproot, eradicate what we believe the Dhamma to be, what the Buddha's word we thought was, when it is clearly challenging that, whatever it is that we're reading. So put away your red marker. And if you're not ready to read the text. Fine. But please don't find fault with the Dhamma or what the Buddha said. Otherwise, it's just a classic case of sour grapes, right? But that's what we have. So no amount of scholasticism or academic status or pedigree of such, which means nothing compared to the actual understanding of the Dhamma. I say this after having spent over 40 years in academia, having a doctorate in Buddhism, having several master's degrees. It means nothing. Nothing. I don't even know where my degrees are. Collecting dust somewhere. It means nothing compared to spending even a single hour really giving yourself up to what the Buddha is saying, to really relinquish your ideas, your interpretations, what this commentator said, what that person had said, what in that book, in this sub-commentary was said about this, all junk. And today we have plenty of commentaries too. The biggest one is ourselves. The red marker I mentioned? So if you're trying to learn, just like you're trying to learn a new language, you cannot impose your own opinions upon the dictionary, when the dictionary is there to teach you, to help you what the definition is, to show it to you. So humility is necessary, but above all, you need to be open to what is being said in the discourses, in the suttas. That is how you can start to learn the Dhamma. And we all are students. We all bow to the Dhamma because it is for everyone. And it is for all time. However, that doesn't mean that it is going to stay for all time available. This is what Bhante Nyananda kept saying before he died in his latter discourses or sermons that he gave. You can see, you can feel his heart bleeding in his writing, in his voice, in his frail voice, whenever he was able to get up in front of the public and speak. Unfortunately, many of the monks who came to listen did not listen. They were dying to criticize him. That's why he didn't have much of a voice. He didn't become a famous person. I don't even believe that he even had a passport to travel outside of Sri Lanka, versus everybody else who wants to become somebody with nothing compared to him. He was a giant, but no one hears about him. Giant. Everybody else is basically in kindergarten class. Every other major scholar type Buddhist teacher, I happen to be one, but much more famous than I am, or would ever want to be. All of us are like kindergarten students playing around in the sandbox somewhere when he was the postdoc. He was the professor looking down from the top balcony, looking and happy that we are there. We are just kids compared to him and his knowledge. Yet, how many people have you seen or heard who gave accolades, who recognized his work? Again, I don't want to sidetrack, but I just want to mention how people didn't like what he was saying because he took us back to beyond the junkyard of commentators and their work, and back to the suttas, back to the discourses. It's challenging, I know. But that's the whole point. Otherwise, how can we attain wisdom while holding on to the junkyard? It can't work. So similarly, we have to allow ourselves the dignity to learn something new by dropping whatever's convenient. That comes easily, just like that person who was sitting in front of the laptop and writing like a machine, because that's all we're going to be. Like those people who transcribe in I think, legal settings in a courtroom. You go ahead and ask them, what did that person say? They won't stop and look at you and start, put their hands against their forehead and say, well, they were saying this, but in fact they were trying to say, no, they will look down at what they typed and they will tell you down to the comma, to the dot, and they pause, dot, they this, that, like a machine automaton. We are not machines, however. The Buddha definitely did not teach machines, because a machine will never become an arahant. Never. In 1 billion years. But the Dhamma is dying. The light of the Dhamma is fading away. That's why I do what I do in my small part. Day and night I sit to translate. Day and night I sit and go back to the sources as much as I can to try to find out. You have to augment that with the practice, of course. And really be fearless in diving deep, and to relinquish what you thought this statement said for decades. You have to be able to drop it, at the drop of a hat, as they say, because the evidence is overwhelming in what you understand the Pali to be saying. Looking at the context, you can look at all these different things and not just go and follow somebody else over there because their teacher used to use this term to translate the Buddha's term. Who cares? Go back and look at the Dhamma for what it is, not because it's convenient. And learn, understand, and relinquish. That way, hopefully, the Dhamma will last a little bit longer, a little bit longer, a little bit longer. Because even the Buddha said it will die, the teachings will disappear. And when they disappear, there's no exit for a long, 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 long time. A very long time. Meanwhile, people will come and go. People will come and go and stay and maintain in misery and write poetry and write, books on theology and this and that. Follow this, follow that. New religions come and go. But basically the only religion that people will follow will be those of the defilements, the poisons in the heart of lust, greed, hatred, anger, aversion, and the worst, delusion, which is the absolute absence of the Dhamma. That's what we're trying to minimize the chances of happening. But it's happening. It's happening. So nowadays, my hope is coming from actually to have this change happen. I see more of it within the laity than monastics, I'm sad to say. It's not a new discovery. I've known this for decades, but lay people have a chance because the others are just monastics. It's really, really a miracle to see somebody who's willing to shed all their misconceptions, their beliefs. A layperson has less of a chance, so long as they are able to maintain their integrity in their, the challenging posture that they are like, okay, to interrogate, to question, to be truthful to themselves and not to just follow along or lie to themselves. Anyhow, so cute.